Good evening, everyone, and welcome to From Where I Sit. This is our January 20th show, 2025. I am your host, Dr. C. Thank you for joining me this evening. Now, for those of you who probably know that I'm a little bit a day late since I was still stuck out on the road working yesterday, but this is the show that we were going to do yesterday. And so, without any further ado, let us dive right in. Now, this particular show is of major significance because, excuse me, because we are launching this brand new podcast during the administration of Trump. Yeah, of course, everybody knows he is now the president of the United States for a second time around. And if any of you have been paying attention and listening to the news, watching the news or whatever, he is off to a horrible start. And when I say a horrible start, he is literally targeting everyone that he hates. And so it is very important for all of us to understand why this podcast is so important. And by the way, you don't have to just listen and tune in to my podcast. There are others like mine out there. But I felt like it was a need for another voice to be added to the chorus. Not only that we think that another voice needs to be added to the chorus, I think it's time, and I believe really deeply in my heart and my spirit that this podcast needs to lead the way to build cohesion in the Black community. So, this is what we're going to be talking about this evening. Of course, Black Power is what this is all about. Black Power, baby, Black Power. We'll talk a little bit about the 1968 Olympics. If you look at this screen right here, you'll see the two gentlemen in 1968 that decided to do the Black Power salute. It's a great picture. It's so beautiful. And so we'll talk about that and why the Olympics is important and a good springboard into what we're going to be talking about over the next 4 years and beyond. Like we also said, we are going to take a historical focus and apply the lessons of history to the challenges and tribulations that we're going to be facing today. So we'll be talking a little bit about the civil rights movements of the 40s and 50s and 60s. And by the way, we are going to talk about these 3 decades because they are indicative in terms of the challenges that we are going to have here in 2025. And of course, last on this list in terms of us getting you pumped up and sending you out on your way with the information that you need in order to build your Black communities, and action is what is needed. And when I say action is what is needed, I'm not talking about you getting on your computer, trolling somebody or posting videos or something like that. We need to get out there and do physical action. Me, in terms of my action, I am a former teacher. I have a doctorate in marketing, in international business, and I also have a master's in international relations, and also a master's in marketing. And of course, I have lots of other certificates in law, et cetera, et cetera. You guys have seen that in my introductory video. So I am going to use all of the knowledge that I have to pass on to you, for you to pass on to your communities, in order for us to build up our communities and buttress ourselves against the hate that is going to be coming our way. So action is absolutely important. So I wanted to post this, and the reason why is because I think this is really important. I mean, we're talking about Black Power, baby, Black Power. And during the civil rights movement of the 1960s, when Dr. King exploded onto the scene, when Malcolm X was out doing his thing, I was 7, 8, 9, and 10 years old. And I grew up with these leaders. And I, as a young child, was very well aware of what these men were talking about and what their focus was and the significance of them urging us to lift each other up. So when we talk about Black Power, baby, what does this really mean to you? In fact, I would like for you to take this question and ask people in your family, people in your community, your friends, your coworkers. Ask them, what does this idea of Black Power really mean to you? Now, I'm going to tell you what it means to me. And I learned this today. And yes, you know, I have a lot of education, but you never, ever stop learning. And so I learned this today. I learned today that the word niggas, and when I say the word niggas, I am saying in the original meaning Nigas. Nigas, niggas. That word in the old Ethiopian kingdoms and the Ascitic dialect in East Africa means, niggas means king, ruler, the one who is in charge. That is what the original meaning is. And if we go back in history, when these languages were being spoke in East Africa, most definitely in Ethiopia, niggas means king, ruler. That is how the rulers and the kings of the kingdoms in East Africa were addressed. It wasn't until through time that the meaning of this word changes to Negro, meaning black, and all of these other things with the Europeans coming in contact with Black folks from Africa. The meaning of that word changes over time, but it changes over time in terms of the sense that the word is actually has a negative connotation to it. But the original meaning and the way that we ought to use it, niggas, as meaning king, ruler, master of your own destiny. That's what it means. And if you really dig down deep, and when we talk about Black Power, baby, that's what it really means. When every other person on this planet looks at us, sometimes they look at us with fear, sometimes with disdain, and sometimes with admiration. But I want you to take it as you being the master of your destiny, master of your fate, and master of others. That's real Black power. So take the question, Ask folks in your family, your community, your friends, your coworkers, wherever you are. Ask those brothers and sisters of yours, hey man, hey baby, what does Black Power really mean to you? And share those responses in the comments after we post this video. We definitely want to hear from you from the comment section when we post this up onto YouTube. So we definitely want to see what you found out and what you think Black Power really means to you. So, like I said, we're going to start off with today's lesson talking about the 1968 Olympics. And before we actually get to the Olympics, I think it's important for all of us to understand all of the different things that were happening in 1968. Yes, 1968 was a volatile year. There were protests to the Vietnam War. Of course, for those of you who study African American history, there were civil rights protests. And yes, there were leftist leaning politics around labor. And if we take a look at this picture right here, this is a picture of Paris. I believe this is Paris, France. Yes. And they were protesting in 1968 against the Vietnam War. They were protesting for civil rights. I mean, it seemed like in 1968 that the whole planet was in revolution, baby. I remember it vividly as a kid. Okay. And so the Olympics culminates all of these protests into one single event, which happened to be a watershed moment for African Americans, in so much that it was a combination, like I said, of all of these protests put together. The 1968 Mexico City Olympics featured a protest by Tommie Smith and John Carlos, right? Let me go back to those pictures so you can see. So this is, I believe this is John Carlos and this is Tommie Smith. So if you take a look at that picture, you get a sense of what these two young men were actually thinking about. They were thinking about all of these events and as it related to them. And by the way, their Black Power fist in the air salutes were, in my opinion, appropriate for the time. Now, historically speaking, these two young men did catch some hell for flashing those Black Power salutes, but the image and that act is a lasting picture in the annals of history for African Americans, and we should never, ever forget the courage that these two men displayed in flashing those Black Power salutes. Also, I would like to mention, yes, there were civil rights protests. They were protesting the Vietnam War. And yes, if you're African American, if you have parents or aunts or uncles, I'm sure they probably have talked to you about what it was like for them in the 1960s. So there was a lot going on, obviously. But we want to jump back a little bit further. We're going to come back to the 60s towards the end of our video here. But it is important for us to take a look at some of the other things that was happening to the Black community in this country back in the 40s, the 50s, and in the 60s. Now, in World War II, most Black people worked as low-wage farmers, factory workers, domestics, or servants. By the early 1940s, war-related work was booming. Yes, When we say that war-related work was booming, I mean, everybody was participating in the war effort. Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, you name it. All of these major manufacturing plants were switching from cars and washing machines and all this other kind of stuff and building tanks, warplanes, bombs, bullets, you name it. And at the same time that all of this was happening, Black people, who, by the way, have migrated from the South to the North to be part of this workforce, were actually being shut out. And in some cases, the white working class during this time would literally riot and against the Black community to prevent them from working in these particular jobs. After thousands of Black folks threatened to march on Washington to demand equal employment rights, President FDR, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt, issued Executive Order 8802 on June 25th, 1941. It opened national defense jobs and other government jobs to all Americans, regardless of race, creed, color, or national origin. Now, the reason why I think this is important is because of what has transpired today. For those of you who are paying attention, and by the way, you should be paying attention because make no mistake about it, Donald Trump and his cabinet of hate are coming after us. They are coming after all people of color, Black, brown, Asian, South Asian. They do not care. And he just signed an executive order freezing all hiring for federal government jobs. He also said in this executive order that all employees that were hired by the federal government through diversity, equity, and inclusion are going to immediately lose their jobs. Now, who are these people that are usually hired because of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, they happen to be people of color and women. Yes, people of color and women. They are going to throw these people out on the street because they are different, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion includes people of color, includes women, it includes people from the LGBTQ community, etc. They do not care. They are coming after everyone, unless you're white, and most specifically, a white male. This is the reason why this information from the 40s, 50s, and 60s is so important. Let's get on to the 50s. In the 50s, we have the story of the Little Rock Nine. In 1954, the civil rights movement gained momentum when the United States Supreme Court made segregation illegal in public schools in the case of Brown versus Board of Education. 1957, Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas asked for volunteers from all Black high schools to attend a formerly segregated school. On September 4th, 1957, 9 Black students known as the Little Rock Nine arrived. And of course, as you keep reading this, the rest is history. And why is this also important? Well, it is because of this. The white supremacist manifesto, better known as Project 2025, calls for the disintegration, I mean, the literal blowing up of the Department of Education. Why is the Department of Education so important? Well, it's important because of what I just read to you about the Little Rock Nine. It is also important because of Title IX. That is equal opportunity for student athletes in colleges who happen to be women, right? And so they are going after the Department of Education to get rid of all of this equity for everybody who deserves to get a quality education in the United States of America. It is also important to know in Project 2025 that they are going to plan, unless we stop them, they are going to defund public education and eventually shut down the public education system. Now, yes, the public education system is not the best in the world, but it is the only thing that we have in order to educate our children. And so they are planning on shutting that down and issuing vouchers for people to go to private schools. And in this Project 2025, these private schools are going to be most likely Christian, white, nationalist schools. And if you are a parent of a Black child, what are the chances that your child is going to get into one of those schools? You're basically going to be out on your own in order to educate your own children. Okay? That is the plan. And so in the 40s and in the 50s, where we have fought so hard for equal rights in employment and equal rights in education, this year, they are planning on taking all of that away. Let us get to the 60s. Yeah, the 60s, baby. Oh, how I remember the 60s so fondly. Yes, as you could probably tell from these photos, and forgive me for the quality of the photos. They're not that good, but you can get an idea of what was happening in the 60s. Of course, we had the March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his most famous I Have a Dream speech. Also in the 60s, it was a time of violence on top of violence. During the 60s, particularly in 1964, 65, 66, 67, 68, I can remember those years as being extremely volatile and extremely violent. Which brings me to these next set of photos. And this is where I want to really talk about what we are up against today. Today, the Black community needs to be united. We need to be united against the violence that is coming. The violence is coming. It is going to be perpetrated upon us. And we are going to have to make some sacrifices. Now, what I really would like to do is bring your attention to the very first photo where you see Dr. King and Brother Malcolm X. Now, of course, in the 60s, Dr. King and Brother Malcolm X had some very unique visions of where the Black community should go. Dr. King, famous for his nonviolence movement, and Malcolm X, famous for his truth, unvarnished truth to power. He did not mince words. And yes, Malcolm, and of course, the Nation of Islam, the Black Muslims of the day, basically said, we are going to defend ourselves. We are not turning the other cheek if a cop sicks a dog on us. Okay? two different visions for the future of the Black community. Now, the photo is important because you rarely would see these two men together. They were in some cases diametrically opposed to each other. But the photo is significant because these two men meet up after Malcolm comes back from his Hajj to Saudi Arabia. Malcolm decides to go abroad to really find out what it means to be Muslim. Needless to say, he was a changed man after his trip abroad. There's a lot more information that I would like to share with you about Malcolm X, about his story, his journey, because I think Malcolm, we know a lot about Dr. King, but there's probably a lot of you out there that don't know a whole lot about Malcolm. And I think it is definitely worth a while to dig a little bit deeper into his life and his spiritual journey, which culminates into this picture where you see these two men together. When Malcolm got back from his Hajj to Saudi Arabia, he sought out Dr. King through Dr. King's wife, Coretta, talked with her, and basically said, we need to join forces. Could you imagine Dr. King and Malcolm X joining forces in the civil rights movement in this country? Baby, if you're talking about Black power, that's what it looks like. In fact, and I just want to share this very small nugget with you. In fact, when Malcolm X got back from his Hajj to Saudi Arabia, his overseas trip, and met up with Dr. King, the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, basically said, we cannot allow these two men together to become the Black Messiah, right? To unite Black people in America. So right after this meeting, not even that long after this meeting, I think maybe a week or 2 weeks later, Malcolm X was dead. He was killed. And then, of course, not too long after that, Dr. King also was brutally assassinated. Now, the reason why I think this is important, and the reason why I think that we should pay attention to history so that we can see what we are up against now. These two men gave their lives for social, economic justice for Black people in this country. I, as a young kid, remember when these two men were gunned down. And I remember my mother's face. Her eyes welled up with tears when she found out that Dr. King was murdered. And my father, his face pulsating with anger when these two men were taken from us. Make no mistake about it, we are up against that same kind of hate and divisiveness right now. And we need to be ready for what's coming and have to be willing to sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice for your brothers and sisters in your community? What are you willing to give up? We're not asking you to give your life. We're asking you to give something. Okay. We are going to give you an opportunity to see all of the different ways where you can build up your own Black community. And we need to start small, right? Maybe you need to start with your family and then build out from there. But we do need to do something. We must unify to fight this threat that is upon us. Because if we do not, we are going to end up like this man in the next picture where he is being bitten in the ass by a dog, sicked on him by these white police officers. Yes, police brutality was the thing in the 60s, and it's a thing now. We have to be willing to fight against all of it. We need to build up each other, defend each other. We need to do everything that is necessary to save our community from this country of hate. Which leads us to our next panel, action. I love that word, action, right? It means doing something, doing something. And so I want to show you what that action looked like in the 60s. Of course, Dr. King and Malcolm X were out speaking truth to power. And the Black Power, not Black Power, I'm sorry, the Black Panther movement were basically taking matters into their own hands, right? We are going to protect our community. It was the Black Power movement. One of their main mantras was policing the police. There was a lot of police brutality in Oakland, California, where the Black Power movement originated. And so policing the police, right, was how they got started. Yes, they would get out with their guns, their shotguns, and follow the police around when they were doing calls in the Black community just to make sure that they weren't brutalizing their brothers and sisters in their community. And then from there, it grew to free breakfast and lunch for kids before they go to school. They had clothing drives. They had employment training. And I mean, the Black Panther power was on point, y'all, and taking action for the community. They were for real. And not only that, they were nationwide. They had chapters all over California. They had chapters here in Atlanta, Georgia. They had a chapter in Pittsburgh, PA, where I am from. The Black Panther Party was not playing around, right? And you see the men in their berets and their leather jackets looking all sharp and for real, serious, right? And then you see the women on the left photograph, and that doesn't get talked about as often as it should. Yes, the Black men were the face, but the real workers, the real miracle workers in the Black Panther Party were these Black women over here. They were the ones doing the clothing drives. They were the ones doing job trading. They were the ones taking care of children. They were the ones giving these children free breakfast and clinics and healthcare and whatever they needed to do to help their community. That is kind of where we need to be today. If there's one thing I know, is that no one is going to take care of the Black community better than the Black community. Yes, we should elicit help from others, but nobody can take care of us better than us. And that's where it needs to start, right? These movements didn't happen in a vacuum. There were specific incidences. I mean, there were certain things that happened in our Black community that moved people to action, right? And if what has transpired over the past couple of days isn't enough to move you to action, then I don't know what is. So history has a lot to teach us. And I'm going to sign off with this. I had mentioned this in my very short monologue that I gave you guys yesterday because I wasn't able to get out here and share this podcast with you, right? And the thing that really irked me yesterday is seeing the richest man in the world, the richest man in the world, flashing a Nazi salute at Donald Trump's victory rally before the inauguration. He not only flashed that Nazi salute once, he flashed it twice. Almost did it a third time. He was ready. And so I have to share this with you, and I think this is important, right? There are going to be a lot of people out there apologizing for what the enemy is doing. One of the apologies being made for the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, was that he's socially awkward, that he was doing a Roman salute. By the way, the Roman Empire was probably one of the most brutal empires the world has ever seen. So even if it was a Roman salute, it's still bad, but that's not what he was doing. He flashed a Nazi salute. And he flashed a Nazi salute twice with thunderous applause. They were geeked out in that stadium when they saw those Nazi salutes go up, baby. And then he had the nerve to say, yes, we want to thank you for saving civilization. What does he mean by that? Saving civilization from whom? Is he talking about civilization that includes all of us? I think not. We need to act, and we need to act now. Thank you for joining me from where I sit. And please, please, please do not forget to subscribe. We want to reach 100 subscribers. I know we're not asking a whole lot because we're just getting started, but please get out there and subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. And yes, share your thoughts about this video because we are going to use your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas for future videos. So yeah, get out there, subscribe, comment, and yes, share with your brothers and sisters in the Black community. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. C.